All right. Good morning. Hear me? All right. My name is Paul. Some of you have seen me around, talked to me, ignored me. I don't know. I've been coming to KTC for a good 10, 12 years. And in the past 2 years, I've been volunteering as a teacher for the intro classes downstairs in the classroom, intro meditation, intro Buddhism classes. I've not done a Dharma talk up here before, so this is a happy time for me. I've been looking forward to this. It's a little intimidating because of these folks back here, but I think, they're on my side, I assume. And so Lama Kathy gave me the opportunity to do this in her absence, and I do want to thank her for that. I'm going to be talking today about Buddhism, science, and the way things are. That's what I've called the talk. So just to lead you off in terms of what that means, and then we're going to do the refuge prayer in just a second. Buddhism has an interest in science and a very interesting interconnection or overlap with scientific findings and research. When I first got interested in Buddhism, which was at least 15 years ago, I came across this quote from the Dalai Lama, which I believe comes from this book, The Universe in a Single Atom. How it fits in there? Well, no. Here's his quote. If scientific analysis were conclusively to demonstrate certain claims in Buddhism to be false, then we must accept the findings of science and abandon those claims. Now, I found that to be very open-minded, very refreshing, to take an empirical approach to these things. Empirical means based on observation, what we can find out, rather than on some kind of received faith or revelation. Not that there's anything wrong with those things either, but it's different when I was used to it. And I like that, because I sort of have a scientific mind. I'm interested in that sort of thing. So for a long time, I've been interested in that overlap. And what does Buddhism say? And what are the scientific theories and ideas that speak to the same things that Buddhism looks at? So that's what I'm going to be addressing today. And I'm hoping this will make sense. One always hopes. So we always start off, I assume the volume's okay. Yeah, okay, you're controlling that, okay. We always start out with the refuge prayer. Normally we do it twice in English and once in Tibetan. I'm not confident about my Tibetan. So and I talked with Lama Kathy about this. She said it's fine to just do it 3 times in English. So you could join me on this sheet. We'll just do it 3 times. 3 times is kind of customary here. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. All right, thank you. So in different ways, I believe, and that's my understanding, is that Buddha taught about the way things are. Buddha had an enlightened experience, enlightened the experience of enlightenment, and in the process saw things we can barely imagine. Now, I can't get into all that. I don't even understand all that because I've not been enlightened. But from the Buddhist point of view, and what we believe is that there was a truth to what he perceived and what he taught. So it's the way things are. At least that's one way to look at it. One of his first teachings was the 4 Noble Truths. The 4 Noble Truths. Truth, okay. Noble, from one of my readings, is one of the meanings of noble means universal, applying to all beings everywhere at all times. So from the Buddhist thinking, at least, There was a universal truth to his teachings. One of the definitions of Dharma is the way things are. Not just what Buddha taught, but how things are. That's one of the definitions or the translations of Dharma. So Buddha was talking about something that had a connection to reality, that was based on his deep understanding of reality. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get at here. The other thing that the Buddha taught, and I think this is fascinating, and this is where the Dalai Lama got his thing about, well, gee, if we're conflicting with science, maybe we better look at what we're talking about here, what we're teaching. Buddha said from early on to his disciples, don't believe this stuff just because I'm saying so. Buddha said a teaching is not true simply because you believe it's true, because you like it, because it seems logical or probable. It's not true just because it's consistent with what you already believe. It's not true just because it's been passed down by an unbroken tradition, as is ours. It's not true just because it's in Scripture, and it's not true just because it's said by a person that you have taken as your teacher. Now, that's pretty skeptical in a way. What's true is what you experience. And from the Buddhist point of view, if you experience, then you learn Dharma, and you can decide if it's true. If you practice it and you don't think it's true, you don't feel it, move on to something else. Or maybe talk to a teacher about your practice. Maybe you're getting it wrong, but don't just assume. Don't just assume. He's saying, make up your own mind. That's, to me, amazing. I like that. So it's kind of a scientific point of view where it says reality is not based on some kind of received wisdom, something written down, or a matter of faith. It's based on what you experience. It's based on what you experience and what you notice. Now, in the scientific method, it's a little bit like that. Now, science is not based on just, kind of like intuitive experience of things, but it's based on study, on research. It's finding out. It's skeptical. Science doesn't believe stuff just because it sounds cool. Science believes stuff when there's experimental evidence to show. So there's a lot in science, and it's particularly about what I'm going to talk about today, that no one could ever have imagined, even 100 years ago, could possibly be true. So if science was based on what we thought was cool or logical, we wouldn't have science as we know it today. None of this could have happened. Specifically then, when I'm talking about science, it's going to have to do with quantum physics. Now, I'm not a physicist. I don't fully understand quantum physics, but even quantum physicists don't fully understand quantum physics. It's a really nutty, unintuitive form of science. Despite how nutty it is and unexpected the findings, when scientists have taken the equations of quantum physics, stuff I will never understand, because I'm not a mathematician either. But if you understand the equations and you use them to make predictions, they've never been wrong. It's considered the best scientific theory ever invented. And yet it makes wacky predictions. Albert Einstein, one of my childhood heroes, amazing guy. The most brilliant scientific mind ever, widely acclaimed. He didn't believe in the predictions of quantum physics. He said, nah, can't be. And even though some of his really good friends discovered or invented quantum physics, he said, nah, you're wrong, can't possibly be. Well, even Einstein was wrong about that. So there's something going on about quantum physics that speaks to something about the universe. And so supposedly does Buddhism. So I wanted to compare and contrast. So that's what I'm going to do here today. So there'll be time for questions later, but now I'm just going to run through this. Okay. I'm going to look at three spheres or three aspects of Buddhist teaching, and I will compare them with what quantum physics has to say about the universe. The three things, these are fundamental to Buddhism, are emptiness, interconnectedness, and the role of consciousness. Now, you could spend a month learning about emptiness. I'm going to try and do this really briefly. It has a couple of meanings as I understand it. Buddha said everything is empty, but what he really meant was nothing has its own independent existence. It's empty of independence in that way, of ultimate reality. So this bowl sort of exists, but it partly exists as a bowl only because we say, hey, that's a bowl. It's just a bunch of stuff. And we'll talk about what the stuff is. But what I'm even a little bit more interested in is the idea of emptiness as the experience that happens, at least in small glimpses, from Buddhist meditation. So as I think you probably know, the foundational meditation practice in our lineage is shamatha or shine meditation, quiet sitting meditation. What you're doing is learning to be aware, to be alert, let your thoughts recede, and then what? When you let your thoughts recede, you start to notice something. What is it? Kind of feels empty. You can sense it, but there's nothing to it. It's not solid. It doesn't have material. It doesn't have texture, color, size, shape, form. It's formless. That's emptiness. That ties into the idea of the Buddha mind. Who and what we really are is this vast, undivided, and really impossible to describe reality that underlies everything. From a Buddhist point of view, okay, keep in mind, this is what Buddhists say. You can make up your own mind. Sometimes called pure awareness, naked awareness. It's this, and everything that we experience, all our thoughts, our sensations, everything that we arises emerges out of that emptiness and then disappears back into it. It's very hard to understand. It's subtle, but in meditative moments, you get it. There's something there. So if you look at a single thought, let's say while you're meditating quietly or trying to be quiet in the inside, a thought arises, maybe seem completely random. It arises, we notice, we say it's arising out of that emptiness. It's coming from somewhere. And then eventually goes right back down. So you have thought, emptiness, emptiness, thought. Go back and forth. They're really the same thing. Thought is simply emerging from emptiness and then going back into it. And all our experience is like that. So emptiness, from this point of view, it's kind of like the fabric of our mental being. And not only that, but my understanding is that Buddhists said, this is not just something in your mind, this emptiness thing that you can experience. That's the nature of reality. All of the universe is empty this way, and things emerge out of it and return back into it. So that you have the energy, I think it's like a subtle energy of emptiness that can emerge and take shape in terms of an object or an idea or a thought, sensation, and then recede back into emptiness. It's very mysterious. The only way to ever know emptiness is if you meditate and begin to experience it. There's no way I could describe it that would ever make sense or make it real. It's one of those things, you got to do it. And that's what Buddha was saying. Okay, you interested in this stuff? Try it, see what you do, see what you find. If you find that, if you get glimpses of emptiness, it's certainly been my experience, like, whoa, holy cow, what's going on here? Now, a very important thing is that emptiness, and I've heard Lama Kathy say this a million times. She's my teacher, and I'm sure she learned it from her teachers. Emptiness is not the same as nothing. Emptiness is something. It's just not material. It's something, but it doesn't have a shape. And you can't bang into it and hurt yourself or make a sound. It's something immaterial. I guess you could call it spiritual, though I don't think Buddha used that term. But There's something to it. So let's take a look at that. First of all, we call it awareness. Sometimes emptiness is thought of as pure awareness. It has to have something in order to be aware of it. If it was truly nothing, how would you be aware of it? Can you be aware of nothing? I don't know. And certainly the subjective experience of this is that there's something there. It's just not material. We talk about this as the Buddha mind or Buddha nature. Well, how come something that's nothing, if it's truly nothing, how can it have a nature? How can it be related to mind? Everything that it has a nature has attributes of some kind. It's got something, but it's not material. A quote from this interesting book, The Quantum and the Lotus, I've relied a lot on this today, says, this is one of the many quotes, emptiness is not just the true nature of phenomena. It's also the potential that allows the propagation of an infinite variety of phenomena. Everything emerges from it, as I was saying. But things don't emerge out of nothing. One of the things that the Buddha believed was nothing comes out of nothing. You can't turn nothing into something. So if for phenomena, for things to emerge out of emptiness, it has to be something. It's one form, you can think of it like a form of energy, transforming itself into something else for a while, and then eventually that disappears back into the formless. So this is a little hard to describe. It's wacky. But I think to meditators, it might make a certain sense. Because you get to see your mind kind of emerge sometimes out of a background, which seems like a background of something, but emptiness, okay? So that's the Buddhist view. Emptiness consists of infinite potential to be something else. So out of emptiness come things, but you don't have things coming out of nothing. So that's the tricky thing to understand. Other than that, it's hard to say what emptiness is. It's really more about what it isn't. But I can't go there anymore because I'll run out of time. Let's look at what physics and science say about emptiness. So we know, we all learned this probably in elementary school, that everything's made out of atoms, of different kinds. An atom is basically a nucleus, which is like the center of it. Inside the nucleus is a neutron and a proton. I won't talk about that. And then in the typical kind of simple model of the atom, there are one or more electrons like circling it, the nucleus. It looks like we're talking about planets circling the sun, but it's nothing like that. Trust me, I've been there. Now, let's look at an atom. It turns out that atoms are virtually empty. About one part in a trillion of an atom's volume is taken up by anything other than emptiness. It's 9.9999999, 13 nines, way out, 13 decimal places, empty, nothing, nada. How can that be? But that's only part of the story, and this is where quantum stuff comes in that's interesting. Oh, no, I know what I wanted to say. Imagine you could blow up imagine you have an atom, and the neutron is the size of a baseball, okay? So there's an atom, there's a baseball with a neutron. And you look out from this neutron, and you look, where is the electron zipping around? It might be a mile, as long as a mile away from you. A mile. That's how empty this thing is. And yet everything's made out of it. And everything that seems solid is made out of it. It's amazing. Not only that, but these electrons that are zipping and floating around, they're not substantial. They're not like little bits of anything. They're really thought of as kind of like little clumps of energy their energy, their potential, their vibration. Sometimes they appear as particles. Sometimes they appear as waves. They're insubstantial. And they're moving so fast. They're moving, these electrons, moving at 70% of the speed of light, which is thousands of miles an hour. So imagine that everything in you, every tiny atom, has these hard-to-define particles that we call electrons, moving so fast. Why aren't you moving? Why don't you feel like you're moving? Well, that's a whole other thing. This is how empty these things are. There's almost nothing to them. And yet, they define everything that we know, that we see. Every bit of material. Okay. Talk about some of this a little bit. Another way to look at emptiness is go from the micro level, which is the atom, to the macro level, which is the entire universe. The entire universe. Now, it turns out the universe is much, much bigger than scientists used to believe. For a long time, scientists thought that the extent of the universe was the size of the Milky Way galaxy. And even that would be pretty big. It turns out that we now know that in the universe there are billions and billions and billions of galaxies, each of those containing billions of stars. And it has been said, and it sounds weird, but it has been said, I've read this a couple places, that scientists now believe that there may be as many, more or less, or more stars than there are grains of sand on the earth, which means uncountable, unfathomable. Despite all these billions and trillions and gazillions of stars, and stars are big, right? Our sun is relatively modest size. Despite that, 99.999999% of the universe is empty. That's how big the universe is. That it contains almost innumerable number of stars, and yet the universe is virtually empty. Really hard to believe. Now, before I was saying in Buddhist terms, emptiness is not nothing. Well, guess what? Space and the emptiness of space is also not nothing. For a long time, scientists thought it was. They called it the vacuum. It's like there was nothing in it. There is, but it's made of something. Space itself is made of something. It has a nature. For one thing, space is expanding. Nothing can't expand. You can't, right? If you multiply 0 by something, you got 0. Nothing can't expand. Space is expanding. And what that means is not just that, let's say, stars and galaxies are moving away from us in space. It's space that's moving and dragging those things with it, according to physicists. Now, I don't get this. But this is what they're saying is happening. Space itself is expanding. Space also has like a fabric. According to Einstein, space is kind of like, it has been compared to like a rubber sheet. It stretches and it bends and it warps. According to Einstein, gravity is a warp in space-time caused by the mass of objects like Earths and suns. Space bends and curves, and they've studied this. Light beams actually curve around large objects because of the bend in space. So space is something. There's a famous book by Brian Greene. He's a well-known cosmologist, and he's written some popular books. One of them is called The Fabric of the Cosmos. So there's a sense that it's a fabric. Now, I don't know that anybody really knows what it's made out of. But physicists, quantum physicists, I'm talking a little too fast here, getting excited here. I talk about quantum fields, which extend throughout the universe. But I don't know what those are made out of. I don't want to speculate, and I think it's far from clear even to those who study this for a living. Certainly for someone like me who studies this as a hobby, I'm not going to quite figure this out. But you see a very clear parallel, I think, between Buddhist ideas of nothingness and these sort of cosmic quantum theories of nothingness or space, empty space. The other thing is, in the emptiness of space, particles, objects can emerge and then go away. So if, for instance, in these quantum fields, particles are coming into existence and they're disappearing. It's like what I was saying about thoughts coming out of emptiness. Things emerge, and then in time, we go back to where they were. So what you really have is a yin and yang, I think, of space, which might be thought of as energy, turning into particles, which are matter, sort of, and then back again, yin and yang, back and forth, indistinct. They're all the same. It's all the same. Again, I invite you to just think about what that might mean, because that's, at this point, that's all we can do almost, is think, whoa, it's weird stuff. So that's emptiness, okay? Another crucial aspect or idea from Buddhism is called interdependence. Kind of means what it sounds like. Everything, from a Buddhist perspective, everything in the universe is connected one way or another to everything else. From a Buddhist perspective, the universe is not made out of a bunch of discrete things, objects, beings. It's made out of an infinite number of interconnected entities, where the interconnections are tied up or connected in this extremely complex web of reality. Everything that happens somehow relates to other things that happen. Now that also is a little hard to explain, how that works. But at least I want to throw that out there right now as something that Buddhists believe. Everything is connected. That means what we do affects others. But it also means, and we'll talk about this later, that at the ultimate level, what we think disconnects people does not disconnect people. It just seems that way to our minds. One way this is sometimes described is waves in an ocean. You may have heard this. So imagine you're at the beach, beautiful day, the ocean, waves are coming in. Would you say that a wave is separate from the ocean? No, the wave is part of the ocean. But our mind can look at it as if it were a separate thing, but it's all interconnected. One wave is connected to the other because it's all emerging out of the ocean. Just one simple way to look at it. So Buddhists say, and the Buddha said, when we look at the world and we see a world of separate people, separate objects, that's just the mind playing tricks on us. I think in a way that's what parts of the brain have evolved to do, because we're living in a world. So to function in the world, we divide, our brain automatically divides things up into chunks, into beings, into pieces, into objects, into ideas and philosophies. Okay, that's fine. Buddhism does not say that that's not real. There's a reality to it, but it's relative. Ultimately, and Buddhists like to talk about ultimate reality, ultimately it's all one. It's all part of the same fabric. And nothing really makes sense on its own. Nothing makes, now that's a powerful thing to be telling people. Buddha was not about telling people what they already knew. That's for sure. So it's the universe from this point of view, it's very big picture, his view, and the universe is a relational web where everything is connected and everything depends on everything else and on context, okay? Now we'll talk about some of the implications of that in a bit. So now let's go back to science and to quantum physics. What does quantum physics say about interdependence? They don't use that word, but they do have something called entanglement, which is similar. So it turns out, and this is something that's a little hard for me to understand or explain, but it's possible in experiments to create a condition under which two photons, or actually it could be, let's say 2 electrons, it doesn't matter, because you can't conceive of what either one really is. So imagine an experiment, 2 electrons, a pair of them, are created in the same instant. When that happens, and I don't know why, but they always go off in opposite directions. Electrons have spin. We're going to call it upspin and downspin. I can't explain what that is because I don't know. It'll make my head spin if I try. You got upspin and downspin. In this pair that's moving in opposite directions, if one is an up, the other is down, always. That's just the way things are. Can't explain why. Maybe it's a balance there, a yin and a yang. One is up, one is down. But the thing is, when these particles are flying, we don't know if they're up or down. It's not been defined until it's measured. Now, this is a weird thing about quantum physics. Particles can be either waves or particles. They can act like bits or they can act like waves, spread out like a wave in the ocean. But it's not determined until they're measured. Now, this is another weird thing that is hard to believe, but according to quantum physics, it's true. So you got these 2 particles moving in opposite direction, and whether they're up or they're down has not been defined yet. They're in a state of superposition. It could be either. It's a potential. It's a potential. Now, here's the thing. They're moving fast, the speed of light, more or less, and one of them hits a detector. And that detector, presumably, is being run by or observed or overseen by a scientist or a human. That detector tells us that at that second whether this is an up or down. So this one gets detected. Let's say comes up, heads. This one, this other particle that's going off at the speed of light, at that instant, simultaneously flips to down. Now, this is something where Einstein said it's impossible, because in order for one thing to affect another thing, they have to communicate somehow. But communication takes time, and nothing moves faster than the speed of light, according to Einstein. So these 2 things that are moving in opposite directions that fast, they can't possibly, according to Einstein, they can't possibly react to each other in the same instant, because there had to be time for that information to pass. It turns out, I've done some experiments on this, even if these particles are measured at quite a different distance from each other, instantaneously, as soon as one is detected, the other one takes the opposite spin. And quantum physicists believe this will happen even if it's on opposite ends of the universe. And this is probably tied into what they call quantum fields. Quantum fields extend the length and breadth of the universe. There's an interconnectedness there. But the idea that these particles are not separate things. They're essentially 2 aspects of the same thing. So that's quantum entanglement. And to me, it's a really cool example of the idea of interdependence. They do not exist independently. Because if they did, then what one did wouldn't always automatically affect the other. Okay. I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you. Is this mostly hitting home? Yeah? Okay. All right. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, this is a little fuzzier in some ways, but is the link between human consciousness and reality, I was going to say. If you know about the Dharmapada is this nice, handy little book, which are just quotes it's sort of in verse form, very nicely written, of the sayings of the Buddha. Very concise, very, it's simply laid out and very nice, very nice. Anyway, If you start to read the Dharmapada, or the Dhammapada, let me make sure I got this. Okay, this is how the book starts. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Okay, again, we are what we think. All that we are arises from our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. And I find myself thinking, how literally does he mean that? Is Buddha just saying, well, your attitude affects what you do, and what you do affects what you get? At some level, yeah. But he also is saying that you are what you think. And that with those thoughts, you're making the world. So the idea seems to be, and I don't exactly know about this, and it probably depends on what school of Buddhism you're really learning about. But at some level, what's being said here is that the mind has the power to completely penetrate reality, and in that way affect reality. So I'll talk about that a little bit. As I was mentioning before, from a Buddhist point of view, everything that happens is part of an infinitely long sequence of things. One thing always setting up the context for the next thing. Everything we do, everything we say, and even everything we think sets kind of a little bit of like a climate. And this is shifting every micro moment. It sets up a climate, a context for what happens next. It doesn't determine what happens next, but it is one of the causes and conditions of what happens next. In other words, it makes the next moment possible, but only in certain ways. So that means our thoughts, our consciousness, what's going in our mind from that point of view can perhaps have an effect on what happens next. The notion of karma, very big in Buddhism, as you might know. Karma says it's not just what you do that matters, it's your intention. Your intention, what you meant to do, that matters. Well, intention is just an idea. Intention is a mental thing, it's consciousness. If your intention can affect what happens down the line, that does suggest that your consciousness is playing a role. The other thing is, and an idea that comes from Buddhism is that what we see as consciousness, and I was talking about this before in terms of emptiness or the Buddha mind, Buddha nature, that consciousness, as we understand it, extends throughout the universe. Our consciousness in here is consciousness out there. And therefore, our consciousness interacts with the consciousness of the universe. There's no separate. There's nothing separate there. It's all one. It's non-dualistic. Now, this also is hard to grasp. But it seems to suggest, well, one thing that I want to say, and that's the reason Buddha knew all this stuff, because one thing I was going to say is, okay, quantum physics came around about early 20th century is when quantum physics came around. The Buddha lived about 2,400 years before that, way before the age of science. How did he know this stuff? How did he know this stuff that wasn't discovered until millennia later by scientists? Well, he reached such a high state of awareness, of consciousness, that his consciousness essentially emerged, I think, with the consciousness of reality, became a single consciousness, and he intuitively understood how things are. So this again is even harder than some of the other stuff I'm talking about to conceptualize. So we can kind of put it aside and think about, but I do think about what that means. But the Buddha was somehow able to pierce the veil and really understand reality. based simply on his meditations and his ability to completely free his mind. So human consciousness is really powerful from that perspective, because it's one and the same with the energy, the consciousness of everything, of the universe. Okay, so I know maybe that sounds like a little woo-woo, a little touchy-feely, but who knows? All right. I'm going to be running out of time shortly, so in terms of what physics says, basically physics has quantum physics and scientists have set up studies where it's been shown that whether a particle, like a photon or electron, whether it will manifest as a particle, like an object, or a wave spread out, depends on how it's measured. So it's got no inherent existence as either of those. It's got the potential to be both. When it's measured, somehow, it's as if this thing somehow decides it's going to be one or the other. It's going to be a particle, or act like a particle. It's going to act like a wave. It's the act of measurement that defines it. So you think, well, how could human measurement have anything to do with the nature of that thing? Now, I wouldn't say most quantum physics believe that human consciousness really changes the universe. But there is an overlap there, because there's something about observation that determines things. And these are the kinds of findings that were so unexpected that many great scientists says, there's no way. There's no way that reality could be determined by human observation. And yet, there it is. It's been shown again and again. What that means, not so clear. But again, I see it as a link between Buddhist ideas of the power of human consciousness and stuff emerging out of science. It seems magical. And yet you have these two very different ways of understanding things, Buddhism and science, that seem to be heading in the same direction. So I'm not going to discount it. I think, well, I don't quite get it, but it's got to be something there. Okay, finally, Buddha apparently in his enlightenment understood a lot of things. He had almost infinite understanding. But he chose to teach only certain things. And what he was only interested in teaching his disciples things that helped them overcome suffering. He wasn't interested in just wooing them with notions of how wild and crazy the universe is. He wanted them to know how to be more happy and to suffer less. So of all he knew, he taught about this stuff, and he talked about emptiness, and he talked about interdependence, and he talked about impermanence, because they were he knew they would be helpful to people. So let's talk a little bit about the implications. What is an implication of emptiness? What it means essentially is things don't inherently have the meaning or the substance we think they are. So what emptiness means, both from the Buddhist perspective and from the quantum physics perspective, is nothing is the way it seems. We don't really know how things are just by looking. We don't really know how things are just by thinking. We don't know how things are truly just by forming opinions or listening to the opinions of others. So the implications seem to be: question your assumptions. Don't assume you got it all. Be humble about your opinions, because you could be wrong. Try not to judge everything. See if you can just accept things the way things are, and soften your view, your hard and fast view of reality, of what's really going on. I might say, don't take things so seriously, because who really knows? Who really knows? And meditate. Practice meditation so you can learn about emptiness directly, and you can see how that helps you understand things. Understand emptiness, and you can only do it through meditation. Interdependence. Everything's in a web, as I mentioned. The implications are you don't stand alone in the world. You don't exist as a separate little being, separate thing. You're not like an astronaut floating out into vast empty space. And in terms of the lessons learned from this is, one, it makes no sense to be selfish. It runs against the grain of nature. Because to be selfish, you have to believe that you are separate. You have a separate self. Well, really you don't, so what's the point? On the other side of that, being generous makes sense. When you give to others, you're giving to you. There's no distinction. Sharing makes sense. Same with taking care of others, looking out for the welfare of others. The welfare of others, from a Buddhist perspective, ultimately cannot be separated from the welfare of you. I know that's hard to believe, but this is what Buddhism teaches. Political, religious, philosophical, ideological, and tribal differences, according to Buddhism, that's not just me saying that, are illusions. And they do not exist at an ultimate level. So they're not as important as we think. So chill out. And finally, the role of consciousness, the implications there, keep in mind that your thoughts are helping to create a world, at least your own world. So be careful. Take care. Notice what you're thinking. Notice how what you think leads to how you feel, which leads to what you do. Be mindful. Be somewhat vigilant. Be attentive. Notice negative, angry thoughts and cut them off. Just stop if you can. Replace those with thoughts that are more wholesome, constructive, and skillful. Buddhists talk about skillful means. Skillful means you're actually taking into account what your thoughts are, what you're doing, and not just reacting to stuff. I'm finding that to be hard in my life. Try and relax your thoughts before they turn into strong emotions. We talked about that. And aspire to a constructive outlook based on love, compassion, generosity, and wisdom. Sounds easy, huh? So this is how Buddha went from his vast realization of things when he was enlightened to understanding the principles of reality that apply to human happiness, and how he then began to teach people how to not suffer and be happier through these things we're talking about. And that is Dharma. That's right. That's where Dharma comes from. That's it in a nutshell. All right. That's it. That's all, folks. So we do have some time. There are mics on either side, so just if you want to ask questions in the mics, get close to the mic so we can hear. And don't ask me anything I don't know. That's the main thing.
Found it very helpful, Paul, especially the part about the intertwined electrons. One is up and one is down.
Yeah.
It kind of helps explain my relationship with my girlfriend. We're so intertwined that when I say yes, she says no. And vice
it's like
versa.
that old Beatles song. You hear that? Yeah, thank you. Oh, I can relate. Yeah.
Just first of all, kudos on a brilliant lecture.
Oh,
I think that was
you.
probably the most accessible explanation of quantum mechanics that I've ever heard.
Wow.
So
thank you.
really,
that's a big compliment. I appreciate that.
And it really struck me. I think wanted to explore this intersection between Buddhism and quantum a little bit further, because Milarepa has been brought up several times in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We're familiar with this gentleman that, I mean, if I've got it right.
He's one of the guys.
Is he one of the guys up here?
Actually, no. Is he up here?
Julian would probably know.
I'm not big up. But go ahead. You can ask the question. I'm not big up, in terms of really knowing that much about what he did or what he taught.
Well, what I know, what I've been told or what I've read is that he spent, after maybe questionable early adulthood, spent years, maybe decades, meditating in a cave, living off of grass soup. And one day decides, that he's going to plant his hand in the wall of the cave. Am I making this up? Have others? I mean, I couldn't. Could I?
If so, it's a good story.
Leaves a print of his hand
Okay.
in the cave wall. So I'm not going to ask you how he did that. But
Well, he was playing in the dirt a lot, keep in mind. He was in a cave.
is that a metaphor?
Go ahead.
My question is why?
Why he put his hand in the cave?
Why would he put his hand in a cave just to leave a hand?
I have no idea. I have to be honest. In preparing for this talk, I talked to Lama Kathy, and she said, anticipate questions. I did not think of that one. I think you'd have to know more about the story. These things always have stories, there's legends attached, and I'm sure there are writings on what he was doing. But what was the outcome of that for him?
I can't find a whole lot about it, but to be honest with you, the last couple of weeks, I keep hearing his name pop up, and to me, it feels almost like Shark Week on Nat Geo. So maybe it's just a promo for what's coming up, but...
Yeah, for me to even attempt to answer that, it would be honestly wild speculation.
That's the fun part.
No, I don't want to go that wild. So I would have to defer, and I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Thanks for entertaining the question.
No, thank you for asking. I'll think about it, though. Yes, sir. Hi.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I forgot to look to my right.
You're fine. No, it's okay. No worries. Go ahead.
Okay, so here's my, you're up, you're down, you're down. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I've thought a lot about emptiness lately, and I've heard a handful of teachers, some explicitly Buddhist, others broadly spiritual, saying that a better translation of emptiness is actually spaciousness.
Yeah.
And for me, that conveys the potentiality inherent in the space more, but the people who've been translating the scriptures across millennia are smarter and more awakened than I am, certainly. And so I've been wrestling with, spaciousness makes more sense to me. It feels like relaxing into something, whereas emptiness makes me contract a bit, and it's a bit existential. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. And
that I do. Thanks for that question. I think it's fine to think about it that way, because with any concept, especially a concept that's vague, kind of vague or immaterial, you want to find a way to make sense of it. Emptiness is spaciousness. Emptiness is limitlessness. Lama Kathy has said this many times. I'm sure from this podium, but also in my conversations with her, she doesn't really like the term emptiness. It's not that she's rejecting it and saying that the lineage is wrong. She's saying from her point of view, limitlessness makes more sense. Expansiveness, which goes into what you're saying about spaciousness. And it's interesting because obviously in this lecture, this discussion today, I'm explicitly comparing what Buddhists call emptiness with what scientists call empty space. So spaciousness works very well for me because we are talking about something that's limitless. And it's hard to know what to call that, although, it's hard to describe. So I think whatever word, adjective, analog that you think of, I don't see a problem with it. You have my official permission.
thank you.
I'm not allowed to give permission for anything, but... Oh, there you go. I don't know why I keep looking to my left. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Just at the beginning when you started to talk about quantum physics and how everything, especially at the beginning, was confusing, counterintuitive. The scientists were all like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, I think so.
And it reminded me of a quote from that time because the physicist Richard Feynman
Yeah, yeah.
Had students working on this. He had, coworkers working on this, colleagues, everything. He was working on it. And they were all coming to him. It's like, this doesn't make sense. This should not be. This does
Yes,
not work.
Yes.
But somehow it does. And his response was, shut up and keep calculating.
Which is a little bit like me saying, okay, well, enough questions, just go and meditate. That wouldn't be me saying that. That's what the tradition says. Go calculate. Yes, if you do the calculations, it works out. Yeah, it's interesting. Hello.
Hello, thank you. Yi wanted me to mention that Lama Karma is coming over Labor Day weekend, and he will be talking about Milarepa.
Oh, okay.
So we may get some answers.
Good point. He's giving the transmission of Milarepa.
It'll be a
Not
transmission
transmission,
reading.
it's you say it, yes.
Yeah.
The transmission?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Very tough topic. I started getting into it in my early 20s, and 35 years later, I still don't have any more clarity on that. So I have started getting into the books that talk about the proof of the space vacuum, which they're calling the 0-point field. That's
Yes,
what
yes,
Einstein
okay.
coined it. So there are some good accessible books on that. Lynn Taggart's The Field. Have you found that one?
I'm on a waiting list for it.
Okay,
It's a popular book.
that is excellent.
Okay.
Just gives some hard data on, there's something there that our brains cannot quantify.
Right.
And then just this past week on Tuesday, Popular Mechanics put out an article on a study that is implicating that our consciousness can jump through time, meaning that gut feelings are actually memories from the future. And that deja vu moments may be your memory from the future. So
Back to the Future.
I love the studies, even though I can't understand.
Yeah,
It's kind of wild. But no, thank you.
thank you. That's great. Wow. The Field, yes. I'm going to read it. It's good, huh? All right, step right up.
Oh, yes. Thank you for your talk.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. And like you're definitely, a lot of intelligence and a sense of humor. But I'd love to talk more about science, but more about the psychology, about consciousness, and of course the Big Bang, they say theorized 13.5 billion years ago. Time-space continuum started. That's talk about the ultimate emptiness.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think of life, as we're like many Big Bangs, but in a way, because as far as I'm concerned,
Every
the
day a
world
new
didn't
one.
exist until 60-some years ago. Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned,
Yes.
but because I'm selfish, but although I do care, my parents and such, obviously existed when they were too. But a lot of like as a child, I had this sort of fear of death, and religion. My parents were, we went to church. It was more of a respectability thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't really, they weren't like, well, they were sweet old-fashioned people, but they weren't fanatics at any degree. And I had a friend, Tommy Smith. He was kind of like Kenny from South Park, from the other side of the tracks. And his parents were kind of wild. He grew up wild. He said, "There's nothing. When you die, you're dead." And I'm like, "Oh no, I can't be." I was terrified. But I guess a lot of my sort of a digression there. But since we're basically where our consciousness is really what determines what reality is.
Yeah.
Why is it like but I feel so alone. Like the only thing that really exists is what I think. Yeah. And I can imagine what other people think, but I really don't know. And so much of the existence, and that's and like the Buddha was mostly interested in trying to relieve suffering.
Yes.
And how but the attachment to other people seems a necessity. We have attachments to people because and they die or they or they betray us or what have you. or they don't have time for us, or whatever it may be.
Right,
And it would may become bitter, or or whatever it happens, or over codependent. And so I guess my question is, what is what is the answer to consciousness as far as what you're gonna?
Oh, wow. The answer,
I'm looking to you for the
answer to it. You mean what do we do about it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, how does that fit into the whole? Because I've come in here a long time.
Yeah.
And I still am about as selfish
there's-
as
look
I
at-
ever
there's
was. Maybe I don't meditate enough, but
There's a lot of speculation to what consciousness is.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you could certainly, think about it as the thing that not only defines things for us, but that is who we ultimately are, which is consciousness, and that it binds us with everything else. So from that perspective, it might help with concerns about being separate, different, lonely, because consciousness at a certain level it's the binding thing. It's what's behind everything. I know what I don't know. I often don't know what to make of it, but I know I'm fascinated by it, and I like to meditate because I get a glimpse at it. So for me, all I can say about consciousness is I like to be aware of being aware. I like to meditate because I can explore what it means to be conscious. And sometimes I like to do that at any given moment and realize that everything's happening is not just a matter of my consciousness, but is emerging out of that emptiness. Everything is emerging, and you can kind of watch. To me, it's just kind of a cool, fascinating way to look at life. I'm not saying I do that very often necessarily. A lot of times I'm caught up in life. But to me, I don't know, it's the great mystery. It really is. It's the great mystery,
Yes, before I came here, a lot of times I thought I was, pretty much my thoughts, and my thoughts are just, trying to, we need to create a map of reality.
Yeah.
You define that bowl as a bowl and things. We go on. It's sort of like, and we categorize things. It's a practicality thing, but we confuse it with just the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but when I meditate, though, I started to realize a lot of my thoughts are just crap. I'm always trying to think of something in internal dialogue, but most of my meditation now is more focused on emotions, because the emotions are really where it comes down to, where I am.
Yeah, well, certainly meditating is not about belaboring our thoughts. So yeah, meditation is getting past that, because otherwise we'll never know what's really there beyond that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing, we're going to always be caught up at times in the real world, as we understand. It's not real, but it's the surface world. It's the one we're most familiar with. To me, when you ask about consciousness, I think, well, in addition to reacting to the world as I usually see it, the material world, I want to be thinking about what's going on at the ultimate level behind all of that. That, to me, is a balance, to realize that all this is not just a random, confusing jumble, that there's some kind of order behind it all. And that's what we think about as consciousness, emptiness, Buddha nature. I like to just remind myself there's something else going on, because otherwise the world is very threatening. It feels harmful, scary, out of whack, So I think the idea of the Buddha nature, Buddha mind, is that there's something way bigger behind it all. And we got to pay attention. We got to learn to pay some attention to that. That's why we meditate. Pay attention to that. So we have both. Both, we're living, and this is a law, I can't get into it too much, but we're living in two worlds. So how do you live in two worlds? Well, it's better to live in two worlds where one is the material world and one is pure consciousness than just the material world. So I'm trying to integrate the consciousness. Say, hey, there's both going on. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
That could be my next talk.
I could hog the microphone, but
Yeah, and we really ought to stop because I'm over. Do you want? I can hang out afterwards if you want.
I could, yeah. Let's
Do you
do that.
mind?
Yeah.
I don't mind waiting.
Well, no, that's what I know, and I'll be brief. But to the question of what is consciousness, how does it arise, I wanted to mention Erwin Schrödinger.
Yeah.
He was one of the early
Schrodinger's cat.
Schrodinger's cat. He's
Schrodinger's
famous
cat.
for that. He also defined wave probability, which is also interesting in the context of the talk that you gave. But he wrote a book called What is Life? And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever read. And it's if you can get past the first part, which is very dense, it goes into the science of molecular genetics. He predicts the presence of DNA decades before it's discovered. But in the second part, he converts all of that understanding into the question of consciousness, awareness. It is what we are, it is shared, it is one. It is not my awareness and your awareness, it is the awareness that we share. And he defines it as the ability of a living organism to respond, to be aware, to respond to its circumstances.
Okay, yeah.
And that's, I think, very powerful for me to understand that anytime I'm dealing with something that makes me struggle, it calls my awareness to it. And so therefore, I'm never more aware than I am when I'm struggling.
That's interesting.
When I am in the depths, I am aware, and I'm also growing, I'm evolving. Yeah. So I wanted to share that. Erwin Schrödinger, What is Life?
Oh, yeah. It's hard to take those moments of struggle and take them for granted. They do get our attention, huh? All right, well, thank you. Let's do this. Thanks for hanging in there while we run a little bit over, but that's all right. So we're going to do the dedication of merit, as we always do, because we believe that there is merit in participating in one way or another in Dharma activities, including learning sessions, and we want to share the merit with all living things, because we're all one. There's nothing to hoard and nothing to hide. Okay, so if we can do this together. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, may I follow their path. I completely dedicate all this virtue. That's right. Thank you.